Hi, it's Rupert Hime from Action Coach Nick Ross here, and I'm joined today by Stuart Young of Etive. So, Stuart, you've been in business 17 years now, or at least Etive's been running for 17 years. So, what took you into setting up your own business?
Oh, I always wanted to work for myself. I always wanted to try and create something and own and manage it myself and run it and enjoy the successes and more often the failures that go with it. Um, so yeah, that's what it took me into it. But it took a long time to get into it because it was finding the thing to do, the right thing to do. It wasn't a case of, oh, I just want to run a business or start up a business. It took quite a few years of finding what that business was going to be.
And how did you go about finding that thing? Because you you've got quite a niche.
Yeah, well, the area we work in, well, the area we started working in is to do with property data and information. Obviously, it's grown since then, but that's how it started. And just like any other ordinary homeowner, home buyer, way back in 2000, it was a case of I bought a house, a lot of problems going through that residential property transaction, and thought, good grief, there must be something here that could be done to help improve that process. And that's how it started. So it took until 2006 before the opportunity arose and the environment was right, the conditions were right, when I was able to just take that plunge. And so, like a lot of people I speak to as well, the businesses that they start are based on a personal experience. And mine was through a personal, painful experience.
So, how did you set about taking that personal painful experience and creating something that would help other people avoid the pain that you'd been through?
Oh my gosh, Rupert. Gosh, it took a while. I knew what the solution was, or I'll rephrase that. I had an idea what I thought the solution might be. Yeah. And myself and a friend at the time, we developed that and took it, as you might say, took it to market. And we started on a very low scale. And like a lot of startups, it was going nowhere fast. We're making a lot of mistakes, a lot of a lot of misunderstandings. We were coming into an industry that we had no experience of, but we came into it. That has its advantages because if you come into an industry as a consumer, you see things that the industry doesn't see. But obviously, the downside of that is you don't know what you don't know. So you come into it, and we worked at it, tried, made quite a few mistakes, went after a specific market sector which we thought was the industry sector that was going to really drive us. And then I had a business meeting, sales meeting, in the very, very early stages with actually the largest building society in the UK. So I went to a sales meeting down in England to their head office. And it was something that one of the characters in the meeting, I can't remember his name, said, have you thought about looking at this particular sector? Because that's where we have a lot of pain. And that was the new homes building sector, new home building. And we pivoted the business round. And within a year, the business just went rocketed, totally changed. So what it was, just going through, making mistakes, but most importantly, listening to what other people were saying, people who were in the industry, and you pick up something. It was just in a conversation, it wasn't a phone. You thought, good grief, actually, that's right. So it helped us then put in place a strategy that was much more focused, a much better developed solution to meet a very defined specific need, which made it a lot easier when we were then speaking to a customer base. We were very clear on what the proposition was and the problem that we were working to solve. And we got investment, and the rest is history at that point in time.
Fantastic. So you've got that lovely balance between not knowing you can't do something because you don't know the sector, and listening to the people who do know the sector who could guide you to the right area.
Yeah, yeah.
And we probably should let people know it's all about it's all about property property transactions, and particularly data that sits behind it.
Well, it's pivoted, it's grown, pivoted has grown since then. How the business has evolved, and lesson number one is always listen to the customer. Lesson number two is to allow for evolution and taking your business. And what then happened from by 2013 onwards is we realized that actually we were missing a trick. And the big primary focus of what the business does now is around customer identity and digital identity trust schemes. So what we do now is link a person to a property. So you're looking at things about, again, further enhancing the home buying and selling process, meeting regulation, increasing the barriers to property fraud, looking at reduced failed transactions, looking at proof of address, proof of ownership. So we've been able to take up what we started off with property data, because in the end, you're an owner of a property, but the reality is you're a part-time occupant of that property because you'll sell it at some point, whether you're a tenant or an owner. And that individual information about a person becomes a very important aspect of that property data. Does that make sense? Am I making sense there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that I mean that takes you into really quite a challenging area where you've got, as soon as you start getting into personal data, not only have you got everyone looking to keep it protected, but you've also got, and I spotted your article on LinkedIn the other day where you've got, you're talking about the whole world of people hacking into data.
Yeah.
How how
Well,
how how, how do you protect your client's data against all
uh,
the bad actors out there?
Rupert, I could take the Fifth Amendment here and say, look, I can't talk about this, but no, it's a valid point. And I think we know over the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years, data is the new gold, isn't it? It's the oil, the future. And it is a constant problem of dealing with that. And working now around digital identity and people's personal identity is the absolute honeypot. Because if I was able to arrest your identity, Rupert, I could carry out enormous amounts of fraud. And this is what happens. You know, we work in one use case looking at home buying and selling as one aspect. And there's an awful amount of fraud that goes on in property transactions. So how do you protect people from that? And then how do you protect the evidence behind that is absolutely critical. So we know HSBC was hacked recently. A very big legal technology company called CTS was hacked recently. So you've got to be careful to say never say never, no matter what you do. So you have to implement a whole range of strategies and processes and procedures to protect data. And I think anyone who's involved in this sort of area will have a fairly good idea of some of the things you kind of need to do. So, for example, we don't connect with social media, our products and the services we provide, because that creates a gateway, because social media is just so unreliable and unsecure. We don't buy or sell data. We don't sell customer data. We don't market stuff to people. So all these kind of gateways that could potentially allow bad actors in, we just close them down and just don't do certain things, to help protect.
Yeah, yeah, and that, I mean, it's really, I mean, it's really powerful when you start looking at the whole chain that you're involved in, and whether it's the data world that you're in or any other production process. And so well, where are your critical points, and how do you put your controls in?
Yeah.
So so if you look back on those 17 years, and what would you say are the top three lessons that you'd want to pass on to new and aspiring business owners?
Well, the first one has to be it's a marathon. There's no sprints in this. You know, you've got to be mentally prepared that you're in it for the long haul. You know, there's no quick success schemes here. It is a marathon. You've got to prepare yourself mentally of what you've got to put into it. It is a long haul. It's tough. It's very tough on you personally, and it's very tough on those around you. So the second thing is maintaining your focus on your family and the people around you, and making sure that they're getting as much attention as you're giving your business, because the health and well-being of your relationships outside of your business have a positive impact on you within your business. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the third thing I would say, and it's going back to my point that I made earlier on about listening, is everyone, we are all very bad listeners. That's human nature. You know, it's not a criticism, is way. Teach yourself to learn, to listen. Listen to what people say, irrespective of what industry they come from, or their seniority, or their experiences. You will always learn something from other people. And I think that is so important as well. Just listen and learn. Keep your mouth shut more.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's interesting. We started talking about listening and you listening to your customers,
Mm.
and we've sort of almost come full circle to now listening and learning and focusing on your own development.
Yeah.
So the whole world of data, the whole world of computing is undergoing this mammoth shift at the moment with
Mhm.
AI coming in. Where do you see yourself being in 5 years?
Gosh, that's a very tough one, because, as we know, technology changes so rapidly. And I remember it was in December last year, in fact, a year ago exactly, I first I read an article which was probably the first real in-depth article I read on AI. And I thought, wow, this is serious stuff here, I think. So I put up an article on LinkedIn in January talking about just a question about what people think about this. Didn't get a huge response. Now you look at us less than a year later. Here we have a technology, that, like anything new, has enormous benefit to do good. But by default, if it can do good, it can do bad, you know? And I think AI is fundamentally changed a lot of things of how people do things, and very importantly how companies think. And you talked about security, for example. You know, with AI you can automate hacking now. So whereas it might have took you half an hour to try and hack something, you could spend half an hour hacking 100 things. You know, so AI has totally changed that. And I think just looking at something like that, it is so difficult to predict where that seat takes us in the next 5 years. And if I use my own examples of how our business has evolved, it started in property, purely focused on property data. And then suddenly we find we're dealing with people and identity. So Rupert, I'm cognizant of, I'm not really answering your question because I can't answer that question. It's such a tough decision. There's very few technologies that have really come into the market and revolutionized things, or not revolutionized, but fundamentally changed things. You know, we had blockchain. It's been on the market for what, 15 years now, and it's still never really caught the imagination of things. But who would have thought apps would have taken off to where they've taken off to? You know, there's loads of things that happen. Some things catch the imagination, and it's so difficult to predict. But I think, in terms of where we'll be in 5 years' time, we'll be dealing with AI, data. You know, the problems with AI, a lot of financial crime risk people have a real worry about AI because of synthetic identities, for example. So I think as more of us are transacting digitally, and both just not just as citizens, but commercially, the world of that is going to change enormously and become arguably more sensitive to the changes in technology. It's such a tough area to define, I think.
Yeah, and I was listening to someone the other day who was sort of almost saying, "Yeah, you got to look at the risks with it, but at the same time, it's pretty much a case of yeah, AI is able to scale the automation of stuff, keep doing the stuff you're doing, but just look at how rather than saying how can AI do stuff differently, how can AI help me do the stuff I need to do."
Rupert, I think you put it very well, and I think that's where people have to remember it is just a tool.
Yeah,
You know how you use it, it supports. There's no going back to what I said at the very beginning. There's no shortcuts. You can't use AI for shortcuts. It can help you. Like everything, these things are just tools to help.
that's brilliant. So if there's just one final piece of advice, what's the one non-negotiable that you have in your business that you need yourself and everyone around you to do without fail?
The biggest lesson, it took me a long time to learn this, was trust and confidence. Getting your market, and when I talk about your market, the people to trust you, because people, if they're going to use your company, your service, your product, they want to know, can they trust you? You know, are you going to do a good job for them? And that's it. And are you just, that's it. Trust,
Yeah,
just building trust.
yeah.
Because in
No,
the end, if you're running your own business or a company or you're leading a business, you are that brand, and people need to know that they can trust you. And that starts at the top, filters all the way down.
yeah, really powerful. That's been absolutely superb. Thank you so much, Stuart.
No, thank you
I,
very much, Rupert. You've given me a bit of thinking.
I love the whole message around, you know, it's ultimately it's all about listening and making sure that you continue to have that trust built around you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Rupert. That was good.